handshaking emoji, the emotes. I
Let
tried.
me briefly outline the rules and format for tonight's debate. We will begin with opening statements from each candidate, with a maximum of 5 minutes allocated for each. Following that, candidates will have 2 to 3 minutes to respond to each question, depending on its complexity and type. For transparency, I want to emphasize that I have personally compiled the topics and questions for this evening. Additionally, near the end of the debate, we will include questions submitted by the American people. To ensure fairness, none of the questions that have been shared with either I messed up. To ensure fairness, none of the questions have been shared with either campaign in advance. Please note that any public submissions may have been reworded or expanded for clarity and consistency. Are we ready to begin?
Yep.
Yep.
That's very entertaining, Rob. Good job.
Don't sound so enthused to be here, please. It's just a presidential debate.
Oh, I just.
Yeah. All right, quite off the
Oh yeah,
starting.
yeah, we got this. Hell yeah.
Okay.
There you go. There's your energy. That's all I got today.
All right, we will begin with opening statements from the former Attorney General.
Thank you all for coming out here and for listening to what we have to say about a lot of the issues facing our country right now. I hope you guys take something away from this and learn how to vote this election, get more viewpoints, and just to see who the better candidate really is. Thank you guys for coming out. For those that were at my campaign rally the other day, thank you. And I yield.
Thank you, Divine. President WarGuard?
Well, first of all, good morning, everyone. Or afternoon, as it actually is. I just woke up, but that's a night shift issue. Like Divine said, thank you all for coming out. This election is probably one of the most activity-driven ones that we've had in recent times, especially given the last couple terms. So we do appreciate you all coming out here. That's awesome. Your support for both the election cycle and our campaigns, that's amazing. In terms of my actual campaign, what Ed and I believe is that the work we've done so far speaks for itself, and we hope that the people can see all the things that we've accomplished and have faith that we'll be able to continue the same amount of progress going forward into the next term. I yield.
All right, thank you. And we will begin with a question for both of you, starting with President WarGuard. What are your key goals for the following term, if elected?
So the key goals that we're going to have is obviously, there's a lot more work that we want to get done. We believe strongly that the work is never done. You're always going to have stuff that you have to work on. The Border Patrol and the Marines are going to be the focus of the next term, given that state and the Department of Homeland Security was the focus of the last term. Since we've been able to move away from that, given the new leadership under both of those departments, they've been able to keep things steady. Obviously, Border Patrol, we've been trying to get that more active. We've been trying to legislate it, try to get it more formalized so we know what the hell are they supposed to be actually doing, what rights do they actually have, and how is that all supposed to work together. And then the Marines, we ended the Hindustan War, so now we have to figure out, okay, how are we going to take that and keep that momentum going for the Marines, and what else can we do to help them out activity-wise? So obviously we don't want to leave them behind. I yield.
Thank you, Madam President. Now for Divine, same question.
All right. Well, the big thing we're going to focus on is, of course, the military. Like War said, there's always more you can do. With ending the Hindustan War, obviously that was something that conflict brings a lot of activity to the military. This is a universal principle, something we've known for a while now. But in the UN, there isn't enough of that. So we're going to bring the military outside of UN and bring it to fight in other parts of Roblox. Still focus on ACS, but more military-oriented groups that are more prepared than the militaries inside of the UN. That isn't to say we won't participate in the UN, but the military relies on conflict, and so finding sources to do that outside of our little niche is important. Law enforcement, joint law enforcement education, huge thing I want to accomplish. You know, we've tried it before, but with some sort of universality in how we train law enforcement agents, and focusing on domestic tranquility as, you know, the government is required to do by the Constitution. We will have the most efficient NSSEs, more efficient events. We can host more of them because we'll be prepared for them. We won't need, you know, we won't be as reliant on SODU trainings. We won't be as reliant on INOG trainings to wrap all of the security protocol into 2 days of, or even 2 hours of training, because that'll be just something we push from the very start of employment. So the big ideas for my term will be law enforcement and military, focusing on our domestics rather than you know, the internationality of it all. And like War said, there's always more you can do. And with that, I applaud what War has done so far, and I yield.
Thank you. Now, this next question.
Are we not going? Sorry, I have a question. Are we going back and forth or no?
You are very much welcome to, you know, rebuttal it or respond to it. That will also be timed if you so choose, you know, to respond. And then Divine will be able to redirect that if he so wishes.
Okay.
But yes, you may.
All right, cool. So we have actually, I've written this in our campaign server. We have the exact same play for the military, in terms of having joint exercises and practice raids. Because obviously, like he said, you can't fight other countries in the UN because they're not at the same military capacity as we are. It just isn't a thing. There's a few handful ones that we've tried to set up joint trainings in the past, and it just doesn't work. So that is the right idea of trying to get outside military groups to host these operations with. But I do want to touch on what he said about having a universal training system. Each department has a very specific role within law enforcement, and while there are general concepts that we can integrate across all of the departments, like basic weapon training, possibly car maneuvers, shit like that, what he's describing sounds a lot like Fleet Tech or whatever it is, the FLEEC, the training center thing that we used to have years ago that crashed and burned. Um, I don't see how that could properly be executed, but I am curious to see what his exact plan is for that, if he wants to elaborate on it. Uh, for my mind, I can't see how that would be carried out in a way that wouldn't be like just like how it was before. Because while it's a solid idea in principle, that's why I want to hear more about it. Um, but in reality, every department within each event has their own role. It's not like they're all doing the same thing. And while technically they could be interchangeable, it's not the
10
purpose
seconds,
of the
Madam President.
department. Yep. All right. I yield. Thank you.
Mr. Divine, do you wish to respond?
For the moment, you know, when I speak of universality, truly, I mean the basics. Of course, each department does have their own role, but there are, you know, for INOG trainings and SODU trainings, enveloping the sort of the principles of what we teach there into a sort of basic training for federal agents, rather than, like I said, you know, giving it to them all in 2 hours of education at a 2-day before type of thing, like we do right now for State of the Unions and inaugurations, would be much more. I mean, what we saw with War's assassination, where Aqua hid on top of a roof. I mean, if that wasn't taught at a training, then there needs to be something like where that's kind of a security mindset needs to be ingrained at the start of a federal agent's career. Also, the natural transition of federal agents from role to role, we need some way to prepare them just for that, and having a kind of overview, a kind of basic training where they kind of understand everyone else's purpose as well as the department they're entering into. I think that's something that is very important. Also, NSSE's
10
roles
seconds,
are
Mr. Divine.
okay. Thank you. No, I yield.
This is going to be a question of me just following up with both of you. Divine, what you're suggesting, is it something similar to a FLETC, or like I feel like you're sort of requesting or planning on a more like general type of training? Is that something that you're considering?
Yes, but it wouldn't necessarily be. I try to think of the word. It wouldn't supersede individual department trainings.
Okay, understood. President War, what is your opinion on FLETC, if that should be something that should be implemented into our community or into law enforcement agencies?
Yeah, I heavily disagree with it. I think the purpose of the way our system is now. So here's the problem. It's hard enough to get people to show up to inauguration trainings and State of the Union trainings to have the understanding that they're going to show up to a singular agency and have one agency run all of the department trainings, at least in terms of the FLETC model, which apparently is how you say it. It's not Fleet Tech. I just don't see that going well because it hasn't gone well in the past. I don't see it going well going forward. And the other issue is that we have all these departments that are specialized. Like FBI is very different than freaking MPD, for example. FBI investigates, MPD is, their patrol unit. They're like the regular law enforcement. They're solid people. But the problem is, if I'm cross training MPD and FBI in the same thing and I'm expecting them, oh, this is how all their jobs are. Okay, cool. But you can do that in regular department trainings. You don't need an entire organization or to rework the entire structure of how our department trainings work just to get that done. I mean, I feel like that's something that department leadership should be going over to
20
begin with. Did
seconds, President.
you say 30 seconds?
20.
20? Okay, cool. To begin with, in their own department trainings. Like, that's not something that we need a universal training center for. I yield.
Thank you both for that follow-up. Leadership is one of the most critical qualities for a president. What makes you uniquely qualified to lead the country at this time? And how do you believe your approach and skills differ from those of your opponent? If you guys may please share specific experiences or leadership qualities that you feel set you apart. We'll start with Divine.
All right. I think this is really a contested thing for me, especially from what I've seen in the public. And, well, of course, that controversy stems from what my campaign is, boldness. And, of course, I have called out so many things, and it hasn't always ended in a positive reaction. Of course, my time as Secretary General, my time as President of the General Assembly, where, the United Nations dead and very inactive. We had many member states, but they weren't active. And cleaning that up with Drew, with AB, and with all these other people shaped me into a leader, especially from my time as Secretary of Defense, where I struggled with communication and interacting with leadership, into this role of Secretary General, where all of that is necessary, where you interact with a large variety of different people, lots of different ideas and concepts, and making the success that the United Nations has now, in a way, has certainly contributed to my leadership ability. My time as Attorney General, mitigating all of the issues we had there, where, of course, it was a balance between, the public side of things and also dealing with evident, misconduct, evident crime, and then finding a middle ground solution, which of course didn't please everyone, but I think was the best thing. My time as Solicitor General, where I did a lot of the same things I did as Attorney General. I made legislation. I led the way for a new joint internship program, which has been, which will be, I'm still working on it, and kind of opening up the legal sector a lot more to people. Of
1 minute.
course, with legislation too, it's not an easy thing to coordinate with Congress. As I'm sure anyone that's worked with Congress has known, the membership isn't always very communicable. And the success, I mean, the new OIG bill I wrote much of, a good portion of, because it stems from the previous one that I wrote, and that even comes from me recognizing mistakes and faults in the OIG structure when I was Attorney General. And the contract requirement, the Fecal Act, working with VP Ed, working with the Abu and with Danny to come to a compromise when we disagreed about going rogue procedure and how we can mitigate that through contracts is more evidence of leadership ability. I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Divine. Madam President, same question to you.
So are we
Whenever
just
you're
gonna
ready.
completely ignore the fact that I helped you with at least probably all three of these ideas? I just want to point that out. Um, when Ray and I first met at the start of the term, I gave him the idea for the job shadow program to revive the internship program, and I'm sure Divine shaped into what it is now. But originally, that is something that he worked with our administration for. And in terms of the UN revival, that is something that my tenure as Secretary of State, the very first thing I did as Secretary of State was host a meeting with Divine present as Podka with the other nations that were still in the UN at the time in order to revive the UN to figure out what we were going to do. I led that meeting. In terms of the OIG Structure Act, the reason why it is the way it is now is because I stopped the bill from going out because we took one look at it and we were like, holy shit, there's problems with this. And luckily, we were able to have a very lovely discussion with Divine and the rest of the team that wrote it, including the current commissioner, and we had a very lovely discussion, very productive in the sense that we created the new system, but that was a joint effort. That was not the complete effort of one or the other. And I have to give him full credit for helping to write that bill. Obviously, I don't have the legal mind, and that's where I struggle in terms of where he has more leadership experience within the Department of Justice, whereas I have more leadership experience, at least in terms of the US, within the Department of State, within the military, within possibly law enforcement. I don't fully know what his capability, what his references are with that. Like I've been with an FBI. I've previously worked a little bit with SS. I helped lead DSS for a time. I have the knowledge of quite a bit of uh, the way our group operates, and I think I've shown that throughout my tenure as president. And one of the most important things as president is to be able to come to an agreement and then have your people deal with it. Um, for example, the CBP bill. We have been working with the Department of Homeland Security. We've been trying to let them take point on it, but obviously we're involved from behind the scenes because that's their department. You know what I mean? Like we're not gonna just be the forefront of it and being in the public eye of, oh, we're doing this, we're doing that, because it's that department's issue to solve. And I think that's possibly where Divine and I differ. I yield.
Can I
Thank-
respond?
Yes, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. You're conflating a lot of ideas. First of all, the joint internship program was an idea long before I knew you were um, running for president. I could talk to Astro about it long before that. The things with the UN, I talked to Drew in the Secretariat GC or I think probably even before um, you were Sec State. I think even Archie was at that time. These aren't things, and I don't take the unit. I'm not taking credit. I of course I give Drew the applause he needs. Ognian, AB, Kent Trivlax for his work with changing that system, and everyone else. But like Drew has said before, he wouldn't have been motivated to do anything with the UN if it were not for me bothering him, as it were, to revive it. I'm not sure. I can't recall what else you mentioned specifically, but with the OIG Act, yeah. The bill that you gave, so we realized when Ender was to be appointed IG, we never actually gave them power in the original bill, and that other bill resolved that. And I of course I didn't write that, I did support it, and I'm glad we did come to that compromise, but um, it wasn't wholly your idea. I mean, it was my idea. At least I recall bringing it up to divest the OIG to begin with, as we have now. So it's not something to Thank you.
Can I respond to that just
Thank
really
you,
briefly?
Divine. Yes, you may go ahead.
So I think you just missed the
sorry,
entire.
1 second, sorry. Just so you guys know, just in case you guys were not aware, I'm gonna start saying how much time you guys have remaining in the chat, just so that I don't interrupt you guys mid-sentence, if that's okay.
I appreciate it. That's much easier, so I can
Perfect.
actually see how much time's left.
Yeah, go ahead, respond.
So I think you missed the entire point of what I was saying. All these things were joint efforts that we did together, is what I said. It wasn't me helping you like fully with it. It wasn't you taking full responsibility for it. We both helped each other. Like, sure, you
Yes.
had the idea. I helped you execute it. Is what my point was for that. So I'm gonna yield because I've said everything I want to say on that. And like, good luck, good job with what you've done, obviously. But obviously, I just want to clarify other things that we've done. I yield.
Thank you.
Thank you to both. This next question, why do you feel that you are better equipped to lead this country compared to your opponent? Let's start with President W4RU4RD.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? My headset cut out for a second.
No, you're perfectly fine. Why do you feel that you are better equipped to lead this country compared to your opponent?
I think ultimately it does have to go down to experience in the way that I've handled things so far. Um, I've revived multiple departments with the help of others, obviously. Like, I can't ever take full credit for it. I was there to lead the direction and my team got it done. We helped in 2020, we got the military back on its feet. In 2024, we did it again with the Marines. It was kind of funny. I shut down the Marines originally to build up the Army, and then I had to do the exact opposite 4 years later. That's fun. In terms of the Department of State, I helped reshape it in a way that was more efficient. Archie kind of gave it to me blind, and I was like, okay, well, this is what we're going to do. And then, like I said previously, Divine and I helped revive the United Nations. I took more of a standpoint from we got the people together in the White House, in the Roosevelt Room specifically, in order to get that shit done. He did more of a legislation standpoint. I got more nations as in a standpoint. Sorry, night shift brain is really starting to kick in. In terms of just like everything that I've done so far, I think has led me to this point. I have experience with most of the fields, obviously legal aside, besides Ghost Clerk, but that doesn't really do much legal wise. I just sit there and say, hey, look, these are notes. Anyways, but I think ultimately being able to compromise with people and being able to work with them and get their ideas, their understanding, is probably the most important part of leadership, especially in this position, because you're not a department director. You are leading a direction, but you have to trust your department directors and your cabinet to actually get the job done. You can't just do it for them. I yield.
Thank you, Madam President. Divine?
The president does out-experience me in certain areas, but of course, experience shouldn't be the deciding factor of an election. I mean, I don't see how experience alone solely, dictates efficiency. And what we have seen with this administration in where domestics are largely isn't the focus. Whereas our international position was. I mean, that was the big thing for her campaign last term. But of course, half of the list of their campaign they haven't accomplished, or maybe not half, but many of the promises they've made, they're asking for more time on. We don't need 4 months. My campaign does not need 4 months to do everything we've told you we're going to do. And that's what makes me a better candidate. I have the boldness, I have the ideas, and I know how to execute them. I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Divine. On to our next question. Okay. The Customs and Border Protection has been a significant talking point during this election season, with concerns regarding its efficiency and its current state. How do you plan to revitalize CBP and set it up for a successful future, ensuring it effectively serves the needs of the nation? Let's start with Divine.
Of course, I trust Sam. He's my campaign manager. What he's done in giving it the activity it has now is um, is wonderful. I really like to see what they've done. Of course, there needs to be some changes in searching and in legislation, and I appreciate War's efforts in trying to resolve that. I wouldn't expect anything less. And I think just looking at things as they go, I'm not speaking on Sam's case, actually. The case against him, it has a lot to do with context, has a lot to do with the law and what is doing, if we're doing right by the law. Of course, what they have done is within the boundaries, but should they? And I think that's something my presidency is going to resolve by having conversations, having interactions with the public, especially because, um, they're the ones I think taking the brunt of maybe any misuse or any issues by CBP. But I mean, having what was it, maybe six agents on? I don't fully recall, but of course, activity for all agencies, especially a stepping stone like CBP, is important. And if we have a lot of people in CBP, that means that there's going to be a lot more people in places like MPD soon. I yield.
Thank you, Divine. Let's proceed with our next question.
Um,
We're now gonna. Oh, sorry. Would you like to respond?
I haven't even answered the question.
Oh wait. Oh my God, you're right. I'm so sorry. Oh wow.
I
Sorry.
would like to answer
Oh,
the
that's
question
embarrassing.
seriously.
God, I'm so sorry.
No,
Okay.
you're okay. I did the same
Okay.
thing last time I moderated. You're fine.
Go ahead. You may respond.
And so I definitely agree that Sam has done an excellent job of getting activity going. One of the major things that we've worked with both Sam and the Department of Homeland Security with is writing the new and Revocate, the senator that's or congressman that's helping to create that bill. What one of the big things with that is when should people be searched? How does that affect a gameplay perspective, and how can we keep it entertaining for CBP too? So one of the things that we wanted to focus on was obviously you need probable cause to search. The other thing is it's the airport, and most of us don't spawn with guns unless it's a Game Pass weapon. Obviously, they can declare that they have a Game Pass weapon, but at the same time, that shouldn't affect their ability to actually cross the border. And that's one of the things that we're trying to accomplish with this legislation. That should be going out, I believe, tonight or tomorrow. Either way, um, the main thing with it, though, is obviously we want them to be active. We want them to learn vaguely how the tools work because it is an entry level department, but it's not fully law enforcement is the problem. That's why they need like FBI and PD in order to like actually accomplish some things that are more law enforcement related. One of the things that we're working on a trial based period is to let them use the way station alongside other LEO departments. Obviously, we don't want it to solely be in the custody of CBP, but we do want them to be able to work alongside other departments at the checkpoint to check for illegal cargo, to check for people who've crossed the border legally, and ideally, that will help give them motivation to continue getting on. But obviously, we don't want them to do that unless they have enough people to man the border. So unless there has to be a minimum of 3 people in order to not prevent gameplay errors and to allow them to actually, have fun outside of just the airport. I yield.
Thank you, Madam President. Divine, would you like to respond, or would you like to move on to the next question?
I just want to clarify. My role as president wouldn't be one. Well, I just want to say first, I'm not involved with how CBP is right now, and so I'm not fully conscious of, what is being done to fix it, and so we'll see how that goes, and then I can determine whether, as president, I need to make any more changes. But I think rationalizing more searches and declaration, as we're put it, would be a beneficial thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Divine. President Wargard, would you like to respond to that question? I mean, not respond to that question, sorry. Respond to his comment?
Well, no, I mean, that's pretty fair. I mean, you have to kind of see how it goes.
Okay, perfect. That brings me to my next question, similar to what we're talking about right now. This question is specifically for President Wargard. In the last election cycle, your campaign mentioned that you had several plans and goals for your November-December presidency. One of which was to let me just say it again. Wow, I stuttered really bad. I'm so sorry. In the last election cycle, your campaign mentioned that you had several plans and goals for your November-December presidency. One of which was review of Customs and Border Protection. Noting the spectacle within the Department of Homeland Security's CBP, what can you state that your administration has done to resolve the ongoing issue within the subdepartment?
I mean, I believe I just kind of touched based on that. But like I said, we're working with the Department of Homeland Security to figure out what policies need to be changed, updated. They are putting out, they're working on more policy memos to tell and kind of like regulate how CBP is supposed to be doing their jobs, as is their priority as Department of Homeland Security. But like I said, we're working with both Congress and DHS in order to get that legislation done because most of CBP is locked within the code. And that was, because from a developing standpoint, again, you don't want that to limit how gameplay is. What the fuck? Sorry, I don't know who the fuck just fell from the ceiling, but Jesus Christ, get them a medic. Oh my god. Anyways, moving on with my life. But yeah, no, I mean that's the main things that we're getting done in order to try to like resolve that issue. Uh it wasn't the focus in November because obviously we had to deal with SS. We had to make sure that the NSSEs were getting done. We had to make sure that state had capable leadership. We had to do all these other things. But now we actually have the time to focus on it now that the other departments have stabilized. And we're going to get that done by the rest of the term. Oh, sorry, I yield.
Okay, perfect. All right. My next question for you as well, President Wargard. Sorry, just so used to calling you Wolf.
Fair.
Your campaign mentioned that you, along with Vice President Cheeseburgers, decided to run for a second term because, and I quote, "We want to continue the progress we've already made this term. There's definitely more work to be done," end quote. May you provide the American people a few pointers of the policies that your campaign plans to put into action if you were to be elected for a second term, seeing as there were none that I could have spotted in your campaign Discord under our policy section?
Oh yeah, we're still. I unfortunately do have a full-time job and I am in college, so it does take me a moment in order to write that document. That will be out soon, though, I swear. In terms of what we're working on next term, again, the main issues are going to be trying to find new ways for the military to be active on both DC and outside of games. Like finding like another raid group that's like a dedicated raid group to see if they can do practice ops with us, or no, sorry, not practice ops, practice raids with us. And then again, like I said before, the work doesn't end; it just carries over. You know what I mean? Like we can get as much as we can done within 2 months, to the best of our capabilities, and then the problem is there's always gonna be a new fire. There's always going to be something happening with a department that needs to be worked on. And I think that honestly is a good thing because it just shows that there is something that the next president can do, that there is something that can be worked on still because nothing's ever going to be perfect. And then also, it just shows activity, right? Because it shows, oh, look, shit's moving in a way that, oh, look, maybe there's something that can be improved here. And most of the case, yeah, there's shit that can be improved. But ultimately, if there was nothing for me to improve for next term, I think that the group might be dead at that point. So luckily, there is more work that we can get done. I yield.
Thank you, Madam President. My next question is for the former Attorney General Divine. Your campaign advertisement emphasizes continuing intelligence community transparency and enhancing international partnerships to bolster U.S. intelligence capabilities. However, you are currently blacklisted by the IC Directorate following your, quote, refusal to cooperate with the agency, unquote. How do you plan to navigate this challenge in building the international intelligence relationships that you've proposed? And what steps would your administration take to ensure cooperation between the IC and your office, given the current restrictions?
Okay. There's not really a huge gap, I think. I mean, I've worked with the IC even after my IC blacklist. I've worked, I mean, in a lot of ways that I can't completely, go into because of the nature of the work, but I've had many interactions with them, especially when John was still director, and I've spoken to Abu about a lot of things as well. Maybe not a lot of things, but several things. And to Octo when he was still director. So I don't think there's as big as a gap as my blacklist implies. Um, and bolstering international intelligence relationships. There's so many things we've tried to do internationally with the FBI legal attaché program that we've never followed through on. Follow through is a huge thing that we need to work on as a government. Um, and that following through, especially on things like that, where we can interact more with international entities in developing security and the United States' presence would be a huge priority of my term.
Can I respond to that real quick after he's done?
Yes,
I
Divine
think
Divine would be able to respond after,
yeah,
but
no,
yes,
no problem.
go ahead.
I have a question for him, and then I have an actual point to this. Uh, if if you win, would you expect your blacklist to be removed in in some capacity so you could actually read the intelligence briefs, or like how would that work? Also, in terms of the FBI liaison program, we actually did manage to get a program going with Netherlands. Um, so that I mean, we did follow through with that at least. We're trying to. I mean, we would love to get going with more countries, but in terms of getting that program actually off the ground, we were able to do that successfully. I yield.
Divine, would you like to respond?
Could you repeat your question?
Yeah. So in order to actually like work
Yeah.
with the
Sorry.
yeah, you got it. Or cool.
Yeah, I got it. Well, I mean, the IC blacklist doesn't prevent, security clearance or anything like that. I don't expect it to be a major obstacle. Um, and of course, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Uh, I don't especially need it to be lifted. I'd be willing to go through the regular appeals process, but I don't think it's a necessity, given the circumstance and given the nature of my work as president.
Thank you, Divine. My next question to you is, during your time as Secretary of Defense, you submitted a resignation letter that was highly critical of the administration, your colleagues, and the overall leadership dynamics within the government. Also, in this letter, you highlighted difficulties in collaboration, a lack of team mentality, and frustrations with uncooperative departments. Given the tone and content of that letter, many question your ability to foster effective relationships and lead a cohesive team under pressure. How do you respond to the concerns that your leadership style could create similar tensions and challenges if you were elected president? And what assurances can you give that you are capable of uniting a government under your leadership?
Okay, well, let me just. It's been a year. I have changed a lot. I've grown a lot in many ways since then. And what I've repaired the relationships I broke. I mean, Seat and I are friends, or we haven't spoken in a while. Just because of his departure from the community. Um, but that communication and team building. Like my time in the UN and reviving that, I worked with so many people, um, and to foster that revival. I don't. I mean, and that was only maybe it must have been maybe 6 months, or no, even 3 months. I think even after everything with SecDef. Um, so I don't think my my ability to cooperate with a team under pressure, as the question mentions, is as big as an issue as some would make it out to be. Um, and I don't think I would have issues in leading a united government at all. I yield.
Thank you to both of you. We're now going to move forward to our public questionnaire. And this next question is for both of you guys. Time and time again, our military has lost its leadership and the overall ability to maintain activity. I'm sure both of you plan to try and strengthen our armed forces to ensure the security of our nation if a war breaks out. With both of you having some experience in that area, how would you go about increasing the activity of the military? Is it possible to integrate them into the Washington D.C. game itself? Let's start with President Morgard.
I mean, to an extent, they're already integrated into the game. They have a team, they have their tools. I mean, they're not first person tools, they're not what they would use in like UN battlegrounds or anything, but they're integrated on DC. Is there a way we could integrate them more? That's something we're gonna have to look into. I mean, the focus of USM has always been that it's kind of like its own community in a sense. I mean, that's just the way that it's kind of been, and that it kind of has to be in a sense, because otherwise, I mean, what's the point of having a first person military if they're always on a third person game? You know what I mean? Um, so I think like both of us have said, we want to work with outside organizations at this point in order to get that activity going again. What does this go? Oh, I'm telling you, we're going on about. Don't you worry, I'm explaining. We got this. So one of the biggest issues is giving them a target. It's called night shift brain, buddy. Having a target brings that activity, and the problem is with the Hindustan war, especially, it died off, right? So they didn't have that motivation to keep going because there was no one to actually fight in that sense. So once we start getting trainings going again with that and having those operations rolling again, ideally activity is going to pick up again as it has in the past.
Thank you, Madam President. Divine, if you would respond to the question.
Yeah.
Unless you want me to
for
repeat it. Sorry.
I'm reading it. Yeah. Well, like War said, this is something I've held on to since I was Secretary of Defense. Um, that is kind of its own group, its own community, and capitalizing on that to go out into other communities outside of, because OSF isn't a UN dependent nation like some of the nations in the UN are, and our military shouldn't be either. We should be able to easily go and find groups to fight with, and I think to do that, to bolster activities, is something we're going to explore. Integrating with DC, there are those elements of USM that are integrated with DC already. More than that, though, hosting more cargo runs, maybe more recruitment fairs like Juarez tried to do with her EOs. Or my understanding of her executive orders, sure, we
Yeah,
can
no,
do
fair.
that, but focusing on more external stuff, I think, is what's important, and not so much as DC. Because what people do is they join the military to do stuff outside of DC. Um, we can't take away the priority of law enforcement jobs on DC for military, and we see that conflict, things like um, things like SODU and inauguration, where people have to generally get on their law enforcement team, but then military doesn't have as big as a presence. Um, so focusing on popularizing USM as a community outside of exclusively, or making it maybe less connected outside of WOMO and MP, um, might be a better path to do things. Of course, speaking with advisors and people who have been involved with the military more actively um, will maybe solidify these plans more. Thank you, I yield.
Thank you, Divine. This next question is for you. You are widely recognized. Sorry, let me just make sure that we all understand that this is a public questionnaire. These are not from me. You're widely recognized for your involvement in the controversial Chris Gates scandal, where your actions played a pivotal role in the investigation that ultimately led to the dismissal and prosecution of then Secret Service Director Chris 5512. Given your central role in those events, how can you reassure the public that under your leadership, a similar situation will not arise again?
I have the
Sorry.
perfect answer. After that happened, I wrote two briefs. Well, and one is more relevant than the other. One brief on Inspectors General Independence is what it was called. And I gave this to a couple people. I know Ender and Greed were among them. And we made a bill that has been changed now, but would have prevented anything like that from happening again, because the involvement of the Attorney General would not be as profound, or the involvement of anyone would not be as profound. And I wrote a memorandum detailing obstruction offenses and protocol for all of that, so that it wouldn't happen again. I don't remember what the number for the memorandum was, but it's available, and under my Attorney General, I wrote my tenure, I wrote that. So something like that could never happen again, especially with this new bill that makes oversight such an independent thing, which of course was something that many people collaborated on, and something I took a good sizable role in. I don't think it's that's the assurance I have to offer. I yield.
Thank you, Divine. This next question is for both candidates. The White House press corps has been widely regarded as inactive or unused. Are there any plans to reutilize the press corps, seeing as news companies are on the rise? We'll start with President Morgard.
Oh, for sure. I mean, if in order to have like press conferences and the EO signings and bill signings more efficiently, now that we're seeing a resurgence of media companies, we definitely want to get that going. Um, just so they have that access and they don't have to wait at the gate and they get set up early so then they can get their cameras going wherever they want to do. I mean, I know C-SPAN likes to record things. So yeah, no, it's definitely something we're interested in doing.
Thank you, Madam President. Divine?
Yeah, I mean, what War said is probably the best solution. I can't see many other things that we really could do. Um, Integrating press companies into into the White House press corps is, I mean, really the only solution I see. So I don't think there's going to be much conflict under either of our presidencies. Like there wouldn't be much of a difference, I think.
Thank you, Divine. This next question is for President W4RD. Considering that many consider the promises from your previous campaign remain unfulfilled, how can voters trust that you will be able to deliver on the commitments that you are making this time around?
Because we're still working on them. I mean, we have 15 days left in the term. The term isn't over yet. We're still working on things. We got a lot of things going behind the scenes. I mean, it's just one of those things where it's like we have other. You have to figure out what the priorities have to be in order to move everything else forward. And unfortunately, we did have to do that at the start of the term. There were a few more fires than we wanted to that we had to put out first in order to actually progress our agenda. And that's all I'm really going to say on that. I yield.
Thank you, Madam President. This next question is for former Attorney General Divine. What was your motive for running against the current president? Is it because you lost faith in the administration that you were serving?
It's not necessarily a loss of faith, but I think, like I mentioned in one of my questions that I answered in my campaign server, there's a certain meekness that I've noticed where people, especially in leadership, they aren't willing to do new and bold things, and fulfilling promises. So, and of course, there were fires to be put out, but that's not necessarily a full and unquestionable pardon for not fulfilling certain things. So it's not a complete lack of faith, but it's certainly a will to improve things. Moderator, I have to ask how many more questions we have. I have to leave for work soon.
We're going to go and proceed with closing remarks after you're done answering your question, and then that will be it for today.
I yield.
Thank you. Closing remarks, President WRGARD.
Yep. So first of all, thank you all for coming to this debate. Like I said before, it's very rare that we have a chance to actually do this with two candidates that are capable of like really debating each other. Yeah, no, I mean, obviously we have more shit that we have to work on. We are still working on our campaign promises, but the term's still going. We haven't finished the term yet just because it's election season. Like we still have more work that we're going to do, and we are working on getting that done. Like for example, the not the application form, but the sign up form for the Olympics will be going out soon in order for us to start getting that going once we get the dev approval for it. Most of the things that we wanted to do, or we still want to do, they require dev support, right? So we have to work with the dev team and then with our own people in order to get that done in an efficient manner. So with that, I yield. Thank you guys for showing up.
Thank you, Madam President. Divine.
Well, I'm just going to leave you with this. We don't need 4 months to accomplish all of our promises. We're at the twilight, or the sunset of war's term, and many things are unfulfilled. They can try to wrap all of that up into a couple weeks, but with holidays and with all of that, that just seems unrealistic to me. So if you don't leave here with anything else, know that the Be Bold America campaign does not need 4 months to bring prosperity to OSFUSA. I yield.
Thank you, Divine. And that will conclude the December 2024 presidential debate. I thank both candidates for showing up this evening, and I would also like to thank all of you for attending tonight's debate. I wish both candidates luck as their campaigns continue to move forward up to Election Day, and good night. And thank you to the Founders Election Commission for giving me the opportunity to host this debate. Bye. Good night.